Welcome. Michelle and I, as you've heard, are members of Daughters of the American Revolution, which is a nonprofit, non-political, volunteer women's service organization, which was organized in 1890. And our headquarters is in Washington, D.C. DAR is dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and securing America's future through better education for children. But let's get to the reason that we're all here. What is America 250? America 250 is a national, nonpartisan initiative to help us celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States of America. America 250 has partnered with organizations like Daughters of the American Revolution and the private sector to create initiatives that honor American history. The 250th anniversary is also known as a semi-quincentennial. As members of the DAR, you can imagine the semi-quincentennial is important to us, and we hope to spread some of our enthusiasm to you in our presentation today. But now, first, let's turn back the hands of time to December 1773. Well, the United States of America won't officially turn 250 years until July 4th, 2026. We started commemorating significant 250th anniversaries a couple of years ago, starting with the Boston Tea Party. As you probably remember from U.S. history, this was a protest where colonists dressed as Mohawk Indians and dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston harbor. This act of defiance was a reaction to the Tea Act, which colonists saw as taxation without representation. And the event occurred on December 16, 1773. It involved about 50 to 130 participants. While some of the participants were known, many remained anonymous out of fear of punishment. The rebellious act of tossing tea into the Boston harbor wouldn't be called a tea party until 1829, when the Providence Patriot reported the death of a 97-year-old resident named Nicholas Campbell, who, quote, was one of the ever-memorable Boston Tea Party who committed one of the first acts of resistance to British oppression, end quote. Here's a fun fact. Another member of the raiding party that night was Thomas Melville, the grandfather of Moby Dick author Herman Melville. In colonial America, organized tea parties served as symbolic acts of resistance against British policies, particularly that Tea Act of 1773. Many people have never heard of the Edenton Tea Party, so here's what it was all about. On October 25, 1774, under the leadership of Penelope Barker, a group of 51 North Carolina women drafted a resolution to boycott British imports, including tea and cloth. They signed their real names to the document and sent it to England. This event is considered one of the earliest incidences of women publicly organizing and taking collective political action in the colonies. The ladies' defiance of taxation without representation, commitment to the American cause, and their willingness to challenge the status quo contributed to the growing unrest and ultimately helped pave the way for the American Revolution. And unlike the men of the Boston Tea Party, these women did not hide their identities. There were similar tea parties in other ports up and down the eastern seaboard of the colonies. Protesting and boycotting allowed women opportunities to act as patriots, standing with men on this political issue. American politician and orator Patrick Henry was the first of the founding fathers to call for independence and for revolution against Great Britain. In 1775, he ended his strongly worded speech with, "Give me liberty or give me death." Patrick Henry was a libertarian, and he also called for a Bill of Rights and for as much freedom as possible from government. An unintended consequence of Henry's ardent defense of states' rights and opposition to federal power was the fact that his words and beliefs eventually helped sow the seeds for America's Civil War. On April 18, 1775, Dr. Joseph Warren contracted with Paul Revere and William Dawes to ride through Massachusetts to warn the colonists of an imminent British attack. This was triggered by rumors of the British plan to seize ammunition in Concord, Massachusetts, along with word that rebel leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock would be arrested. Dr. Warren's plan encouraged Paul Revere to arrange for a signal of lanterns to be placed in the steeple of Boston's Old North Church to spread the word that the regulars were coming out. The battles of Lexington and Concord are significant for marking the beginning of open conflict between the colonies and Great Britain. These Massachusetts battles resulted in an American victory, although technically the British achieved tactical success at Lexington. That said, American militiamen were able to force the British to retreat back to Boston. The British suffered significant casualties. In the battles of Lexington and Concord, 49 colonists were killed, 39 were wounded, and 5 were missing, while 73 British soldiers were killed, 174 were wounded, and 26 were missing. The total casualties were 95 for the colonists and 273 for the British. On May 10, 1775, the Second Continental Congress convened. Continental Congress lasted until March 1781, when the Articles of Confederation establishing a new national government for the United States took effect. The Continental Congress not only played a crucial role in the war effort, but also adopted the Declaration of Independence, managed the Continental Army and Navy, and negotiated with foreign powers. And in case you're wondering, the First Continental Congress convened in September 1774 and disbanded a month later on October 26th, after completing its stated purpose of addressing the colonists' grievances with British rule. They resolved to reconvene on May 10, 1775, if the situation didn't improve, which, as we all know, it didn't. Now, Georgia didn't have a representative at the First Continental Congress and didn't send one to the second until July 1775, but all 13 colonies were represented thereafter. On June 14, 1775, we are having a dedication, but it's also the 250th birthday of the Army. The Second Continental Congress resolved to create this Continental Army. The following day, George Washington was selected as the new Army's Commander-in-Chief. Washington's personal integrity, military experience, and hero status all combined to his selection. In many ways, he was viewed as the only man who could do the job. Though not without faults, Washington established a precedent of selfless service and moral integrity in the armed forces, a legacy that lives today. In 1784, the Continental Army was renamed the United States Army. Fought in Boston on June 17, 1775, the Battle of Bunker Hill took place primarily on Breed's Hill, though it is known as the former due to its proximity to Bunker Hill. While technically a British victory, this battle proved that the colonial militia could stand up to the British Army and inflict heavy casualties, and it confirmed that American militiamen could hold their own against the British regulars. British casualties totaled 1,054, with 226 killed and 828 wounded. American casualties totaled about 450, with 115 killed, 305 wounded, and 30 captured. A famous quote from the Revolutionary War came from this battle when Colonel William Prescott advised the men, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Joseph Warren is a founding father of the United States, though you may not recognize his name. Dr. Warren was a prominent figure in the American Revolution, known for his role as a physician, political leader, and military strategist. He was a key organizer of the Boston Tea Party. He was also instrumental in alerting patriots to the impending British march to Lexington and Concord, leading to that famous midnight ride. He participated in the battles of Lexington and Concord the following day. Warren had been commissioned a major general in the colony's militia shortly before June 17, 1775, and that was the Battle of Bunker Hill. But rather than exercise his rank, he chose to participate in the battle as a private. Warren was killed in combat when British troops stormed the redoubt atop Breed's Hill, becoming a martyr for the cause of American independence. His death galvanized the rebel cause. Iowa has a county called Warren County, and it is named for Dr. Joseph Warren. And if you're not familiar with where Warren County is, its county seat is Indianola, and it does include parts of Des Moines. What's in that south central part of Iowa? Okay, sorry. On October 13, 1775, a resolution of the Second Continental Congress voted and approved the establishment of a Continental Navy to intercept British ships transporting supplies and ammunition to American shores. At its start, the Navy had only 2 ships. 2. By the end of the war, the Navy had 50 armed vessels at sea, which claimed approximately 200 British vessels as prizes, demoralizing the British and forcing them to divert their warships to protect convoys and trade routes. In November 1775, the Continental Congress voted again, this time for 2 battalions of Marines to be raised, to serve with the naval fleet, whose members could fight both on land and at sea, officially establishing the Marine Corps. These units served in a number of operations throughout the war, including their first amphibious raid into the Bahamas in March of 1776. After the Revolutionary War, the U.S. Constitution empowered the new Congress to provide and maintain a Navy. The Navy and Marine Corps will return to their birthplace in Philadelphia this fall for the national celebration of their 250th anniversaries. The parade will be on October 9th and will be actually a boat parade going up the Delaware River. Here's some fun facts. The Continental Navy was officially reestablished as the United States Navy in 1794, while the Continental Marine Corps became the United States Marine Corps in 1798. In both their original iterations and their reestablishments, the Navy was founded first, with the Marine Corps soon following behind. And here's a fact I didn't know. The Marine Corps is an independent branch, but serves under the Navy. July 4th, 2026 will mark the 250th anniversary or semi-quincentennial of the ratification of the Declaration of Independence. The signing of this document was the Second Continental Congress's most significant achievement. One of the greatest misconceptions of Independence Day, or the 4th of July, lies in its name and date. It is widely believed that America declared their independence from Britain on July 4th, 1776. However, the official vote actually took place 2 days before. The Declaration was published in newspapers on July 4th. Here's some fun facts about the Declaration of Independence and July 4th. In 1777, Congress authorized the use of fireworks to mark the first anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. 3 United States presidents have died on the 4th of July: John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Monroe. Independence Day became a federal holiday in 1870. Only 2 men signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, Charles Thompson and the infamous John Hancock. The other 54 delegates signed over the course of the next month. And the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia is tapped 13 times on the 4th of July in honor of the original 13 colonies. The rest of our slides show how our chapter has been celebrating America 250 since 2023, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Howdy, everybody. Okay, so we're talking about celebrating 250, so we can go to the next slide. You got your clicker? Okay, so what we did is we started a couple years ago. You know, you just can't celebrate 250 without some, you know, build up. So we started in 2023, and this upper picture is a picture of most of our members, and they're sitting in their parade float, and they're holding up the signs of their personal patriot. So when you join DAR, you have to have a patriot to trace your lineage back to, and that patriot is who you sign up under. So some of us have 3 or 4 or 5 patriots, but it just takes one to get you in the door. And I'll just talk off script a little bit. If you want to become a member and you think, oh, you know, I don't have a Revolutionary War person in my line, you may not know, because I always wanted to be a DAR, knew that, you know, Grandma was from Poland, Grandpa, you know, was from Germany. I got nothing, and then I did my DNA with Ancestry, and this long-lost cousin contacted me and said, "Hey, you're a cousin, and do you know we have a Revolutionary War great-grandfather?" I'm like, "What?" So you never know. It's always a surprise, and if you want help, we do that service of helping you trace that lineage. So back to the parades. Then we did sparkling since 1776. A lot of our catchphrases are sparkle because it was this administration's catchphrase where it was sparkling, everything is sparkling. So we try and put little sparkles everywhere. So this past year, we had a George Washington, one of our members, went as George Washington and Martha, and we sat in the back with our sparkly hats, and we had a picture of our plaque that we were working on to put up, and we'll talk about that later, and we won first prize, so woohoo! So that money went towards our plaque. So this next year, we're going to do a recreation of George Washington crossing the Delaware. So we'll be in the boats, we'll have our oars, and we'll be dressed up and sweating because we've got to recreate the snowstorm. Okay, the next page is the grave marker. So our chapter was organized in 1969, and those 15 original members had to decide, well, what are we going to name the chapter? Chapters are often named after people that are locally related to that area. And so the only person that we knew of was Lawrence Van Hook. And Lawrence Van Hook was Dr. Lawrence Van Hook. After some research, we found out that his name was actually James, but his father was also Dr. Lawrence. And back in the day, they didn't actually go to medical school. A lot of times they trained with another doctor. So he must have trained with his father, and somewhere along the line dropped James. So James Lawrence Van Hook became the chapter name. He moved from New Jersey to Iowa very late in life, and he is interred in Andrew. So that's where his marker is. Okay. We did put a plaque in 2023. We did put a plaque on his grave, so you can go out there and find it. You can see his gravestone there. So the dedication was in October of 2023, and it was a big to-do. And we had the color guard, we had the Sons of the American Revolution come down, some of us dressed in costume. I think some people have this preconceived notion of the DAR always pretty fancy with their white gloves and their hats and their fancy dresses. Not so much. We're a little bit laid back, but we do like to put on the old-fashioned dresses every once in a while. Okay, books for Jackson County. So we are a service organization, so we try to do a lot for the community and relate it to history in some way. For those of us of a certain age, we had a lot of history in school. And once STEM, science, technology, math and engineering and math, and I was a science teacher, and I should be supporting STEM, but when STEM became popular, the arts and the history and the social studies really took a backseat in the schools. And if you ask people on the street certain historical questions, unfortunately, they would all fail. So I think we owe it to the younger generation to support history, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here. So we got a grant from the Jackson County Foundation to get some books about the American Revolution, but specifically to those that were considered underserved or underrepresented. The Native Americans served, the African Americans served, and so these were put in elementary school, middle school, and the librarians say they are well received and get checked out often. So that made us happy. Okay, another project we did was our tea parties. On December 23rd, there was the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. So we went to a member's home, and we did strive to wear our old-fashioned garb. And the host member, Michelle Johnson, went out of her way to try and get the exact tea that they would have had back in the 1700s from the East Indian Company. And loose tea was not a thing back then. Does anybody know how tea was sold back in the day? No ideas? Okay, so it was a brick. You bought a brick of tea. And so she got bricks of tea, and I think there were 3 varieties. Some were way too strong, but it was fun. It was fun to reenact and to see, what exactly they might have had. And then a lot of times when we have our gatherings, we get recipes from famous women like Martha Washington or Dolly Madison, and we make those recipes, and that's what we serve. Yeah, we have to tweak it because we don't have a lot of lard, and there's some things we don't have, but it's always fun. Then also the Edenton Resolve, that was the one that Amy talked about in the Carolinas, where women got together for the first time and stood up to men and said, you know, we need to sign something that says this is our opinion. And we had trivia night. We had, between our members, we had some trivia games. So it was a lot of fun, and we educate ourselves during these meetings as well as the public. So anyway, we can go on to the next one.
You want to talk about the tea you foraged?
Oh yes, so they had the tea in Boston. They had the 250th anniversary. Some of you might have seen this on TV. It was a huge thing, and they had the old sailing ships, and they threw the tea in. And as a water quality person, I had to research the fact that is that good for the water? But it was fine. And so they asked all the chapters to send in tea, so they had something, you know, to throw overboard. Well, you know, you start cutting open tea bags, and you're going to spend a lot of money getting enough to make it worth to send. So we did some foraging. There's a lot of things you can make tea with locally, bee balm or bergamot or raspberry leaves. So we foraged leaves, and we had a demonstration on how to dry them. And once they were dry, so they didn't mold, then you could pack them up. So we actually had a good amount of tea to send. And then they did dump it into Boston Harbor. So that was kind of fun. And we got a certificate that said, woohoo for you. Wreaths for Our Patriots. And this is a project that all of the, well, I won't say all, but it's a nationwide project that people try and put the wreaths on the graves. So this year we wanted to do it in collaboration with the 225th birthday of George Washington. Unfortunately, that day had an ice storm, so it was the next day. But intentions were good, and members braved the cold, and they got out there and they put markers on the 5 gravestones in our area. So these posters here, these are the ones. These are the patriots that are buried in our county. Mr. Lepper over here, he is in Clinton County. But we have the 4 in Jackson County. G. Marie Cardinal was buried in St. Louis, but he was from Dubuque area. We can talk about him in a minute. And so anyway, we put the wreaths out, and anything else about that? No? Okay. 2 lights for tomorrow. Amy had mentioned that the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow poem really put the ride of Paul Revere into the public's eye, although lots of inaccuracies. He didn't, you know, ride through saying the British are coming, the British are coming. That's from the poem. It was probably the regulars, because they were all British. Wouldn't have made sense. And then the lights in the poem, it's 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Also, probably not said, but it was in Boston's Old North Church, and they picked the North Church because it was the tallest building in Boston at the time, and even today its spire is very easy to see. And the minister or person who took care of the church was actually a sympathizer and had keys. So he could get in and put those up there. And it was also the backup plan, so that if Paul Revere and the other 2 riders were captured, and Paul Revere was captured, there would be a backup plan. So that was the backup plan. Okay. Oh, and I didn't say that we did that. So in honor of this, you know, the members did put lanterns on their porches. Something else that we did that we didn't mention was the Liberty Bell. When the Liberty Bell anniversary came up, we asked people at a certain time to ring bells. So I had some neighbors that were outside ringing their bells, just to, you know, feel the spirit. The Patriots marker dedication, and you've got a little slip of paper, I think, that announces it. We worked really hard raising money for this plaque, and even though Iowa was not Iowa at the time and had virtually no influence on the Revolutionary War, the Mississippi River did, and people moved to Iowa, to this region. St. Louis has a very big display on, well, St. Louis, Kentucky, that was considered the western edge. So they have a whole book and a whole museum display about the Revolutionary War and the influence on this side. So anyway, we wanted to just say, you know, the Patriots that we have here deserve some recognition. And actually Jackson County, I think, has the third most. Des Moines County, I believe, has 7 Patriots, and there's one more, and then we have 4. So we are really up there as far as having Patriots in the area. So this dedication is going to be at the Freedom Rock in Bellevue, right on the Mississippi. We're asking people to come, rain or shine, 1 o'clock, and we're going to have the Bellevue High School Band. We are going to have taps played. We're going to have people in costume. And then afterwards, there's a short reception at the VFW, right? VFW or American Legion?
American Legion.
American Legion. So you are all welcome to attend, and hope to see you there. And this is a smattering or a collage of things that we do throughout the year. We have a citizens' tea that we ask high school seniors to write an essay. And then the winners of the essay is invited to a tea, and we do that every spring at some time. The Brat Stand is one of our fundraisers at vendors in Bellevue. Grave markers, trivia night, the River Ridge Brewery. Trivia night was a lot of fun. Even if you don't feel like you know history, some of these trivia nights are an opportunity to learn your history. So don't ever say, I don't know anything, my team is going to lose. So what? Just go and learn. Have some fun. We went to Mactoberfest. Now, Mactoberfest has been discontinued until they find some people that are ready to run it. But we did have a booth there and recruited a new member. So if anybody here is interested, you know, we're always looking for new members. We had, during the muster on the Maquoketa, we were in charge of the games, and these were historic games. And I'm going to skip to the end and tell you what's coming. But we tried to get a grant, and we're still looking for grants or for money, fundraisers, to use some, to put in some boxes to give to the 5th graders, because the 5th graders and the 8th graders are the ones that cover the Revolutionary War time period according to their standards. So games that children play outside are becoming extinct. Harvard University did a study, and they said 90% of all of our games have gone extinct because people don't play them. You never see kids outside running the streets and little gangs playing kick the can, hide and seek, tag, Red Rover, you name it. So we thought, you know, this would be an opportunity for us to actually get history to the children. And, you know, what were the kids playing? Were they trundling? How many people know what trundling are? Have you ever taken a hoop, like a barrel stave, and rolled it with a stick? That's trundling. So we had kids doing that. They had a great time. We had frying pan tosses. We had tug of war. We had flour sack races. So we're trying to bring more of these games back to light. How many played Mumbly Peg? I think most guys played Mumbly Peg. Do you know what Mumbly Peg is? I'm going to pick on you because you're a guy.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. How many of you know what Mumbly Peg is? Okay, you do? Yeah, well, you take a pocket knife. Oh, we just want to put pocket knives in every kid's hands now, right? And you have to stick it in the ground. And originally it was called Mumbly Peg because you would have to pull that peg out. You're trying to hit a peg. pull that peg out with your mouth. So you were mumbling. There's different variations on it, but anyway, trying to revive some of these old games is one of the things that we're striving to do. And we thought that would be a fun, historic project. Marbles. I think a lot of people have played marbles in their day. Maybe not. I know my dad did. Let's see. Other things that we did, we have a brochure, and the brochure is up here if anybody would like that brochure, copies of it. And we've done the Tri-State Honor Flight, and the narrow gauge, do we have a picture of it?
Here.
Yeah, the narrow gauge here at Clinton Engines. We've cleaned that, and the car, the box car, as a service project. And we are a service organization, so if you could think of anything that you need someone to do that might be historically related, give us a call. Okay? All right, next one. So our patriots in this county, Eli Edwards, Lawrence Van Hook, we actually have, and William Potter, we have people that are related to them still living here in Jackson County. So the family's been here 175 years. So if you know that you have a great-grandma that's an Edwards or a Potter, you might want to start looking in and saying, oh, you know what, maybe I am related. William Sinke, John Lepper is in Clinton County. We don't know too much about him, but a little blurb about each one of them is on their sign. So William Potter, he was a sergeant, Defense of Philadelphia. So anyway, they're all up there, and we're very proud of them. And we're lucky that we have some patriots to celebrate, and we like to keep their memory alive. Next. So what's next? So I already talked about trying to get a grant for the games. Now we're trying to get a mobile historic museum display going, and our vision is to have pull-up screens, and these screens are going to represent some connection of Iowa or this region to the Revolutionary War. So at first you think, well, that's going to be near impossible. Well, we do have all of our patriots, so we can have one example of who our patriots are and what they did, a little bit about them. But if you look at the people that live in this area, what is their background, what is their culture, and then you look at the Revolutionary War. Well, Spain played a big part. Of course, this was Spanish territory. The French played a big part. They were partners and had territory here. You know, it went back and forth between Spain and France. We had Native Americans on both sides, on the Loyalist side and on the British side. We had Hessians, which mainly were for, you know, the British sides. There was African Americans who fought both for the Hessians and then eventually went and lived in Germany. Some that worked for their freedom, and then some were already free. So if you look at this area, and especially like the Dubuque area, because we have members from Dubuque, we would like to have this display mean something to each person. So we will have something about the children in the Revolutionary War. Many of the children were spies. Many of the children actually changed how they dressed and appeared as boys so that they could participate or go with their fathers. So this is something that we're working on, and it's going to have some examples of some famous treaties, so like a copy of the Declaration of Independence, some famous paperwork copies, so that we can set this display up. It'll be very mobile, and we can bring it here, we can bring it to schools, we can bring it to libraries. Constitution Week is coming up, and we always get a big poster for yeah, I said it. And Constitution Week, and put it out in the libraries. So we're just trying to get the word out and trying to educate people about, you know, history. Because if we don't learn about history, what happens? It repeats itself, right? These are trying times. Do we have anything else? What's next?
The cemeteries.
Oh yeah, so the cemeteries. So talking about partnerships, we have the Jackson County Historical Society, the preservation for the cemeteries, right? Pioneer Cemetery preservation. I know there is the State Historical Preservation and the State Historical Society, the Daughters of the American Revolution. So we're all thinking, how can we partner together to make something for 250? And right now, they want to do something in cemeteries. So we are thinking possibly the cemetery in Andrew, because we have Lawrence Van Hook buried there. We have Ansel Briggs buried there, who was our first governor. And we would like to do a living museum type event where these ghosts come alive and talk to people. So we would have, I think, a little more tied to the Revolutionary War if we did it there. Some of the others are buried in Hickory Grove. William Potter's buried in Hickory Grove, and that one is beyond Emmeline. It's on gravel, probably not our best choice. And then another one is on a B level, practically sea level road, almost impossible to get to. So we're thinking that's probably where we're going to have it, but we have to talk to our committee members, and maybe we'll have a traveling one, and people can get in their cars and go from cemetery to cemetery and see happy ghosts telling them their stories. So other than that, I just wanted to say I'm up here doing double duty because I'm the executive director of Limestone Bluffs RC&D, and we are supposed to be making connections. So I feel like I'm like a clearinghouse or the center of a web where Bonnie says, hey, you know what, we have this project, and I can say, oh, Daughters of the American Revolution, we'd really like to jump in on that. And then we have another member of the preservation, Pioneer Cemetery, says, well, we could be doing that. So trying to get the word out to all these different organizations that are doing something. There's no point in everybody spinning their wheels, reinventing the wheel. Let's get together. So if you yourself belong to any organizations that are thinking about doing a 250th something, let us know, because we can all join together. And if you're going for grants, it doesn't matter what nonprofit you are. Grants are getting harder and harder to come by. Right now in the grant industry, this is a nail-biting time, and we're all sweating the next dollar. But if we could come together and support like 5 or 6 groups with that many people, especially putting in-kind or matching funds, it's more likely that we're going to get seed money to do bigger and greater things. So there you go. Here's my 2 cents. Do we have anything else you want to question besides questions? And Amy she's the expert at DAR. So, any questions?
Questions or comments?
How to become a DAR member, maybe?
Yeah. I got here a little late, so I don't know if you already covered how the 2 of you got involved in this, or the majority of people, how do they get interested, or how do they become acquainted?
Yeah, well, I mean, I got involved because I did my Ancestry.com, and a cousin said, oh, you know what, you could be a member. So then I contacted the local chapter and said, hey, I'd like to become a member, and they held your hand the whole step of the way. You have to traditionally, from you to your 7th or 8th grandfather, you have to have birth certificates, death certificates, and marriage certificates. The internet has made this extremely easy, but there are a lot of, I get back to the 5th generation and there's nothing. It depends on what state you were in. I happen to hail from New Jersey, and they kept fabulous records. New York kept fabulous records. Virginia kept really good records. So it just depends on where those patriots lived. And then now they're even looking at doing genetic genealogy, so if you cannot make a paper trail, they can look at your genes. In fact, I'm going to South Dakota this weekend to learn all about the Y chromosome and how it can get you to be a DAR member.
And I joined not that long ago. Both Michelle and I are relatively new members, less than 10 years. My mother-in-law was one of the founders of Lawrence Van Hook. And so I had my daughter, I have 3 daughters, and they were all in Children of the American Revolution, which is like Daughters of the American Revolution, but it's for children aged birth to 22. And so they were in Children of the American Revolution, had a great time, learned how to public speak, learned how to talk about history and the fun things that you don't learn about in school. And I always wanted to be a part of that fun, but I couldn't because I didn't think I had a relative until I was looking through a photo album at my aunt's house and I saw a grave marker and it said Christian Sturtz, and he was from Pennsylvania and he'd served in the militia there. And I was like, okay, I guess I do have a way in. So that was a dead end though, because he's not proven in DAR. You have, like Michelle said, you have to be proven with all these birth certificates, deaths, and it's hard to find those from way back then. But if you have one, you'll probably have 2 or 3 others because, you know, there weren't that many people back then. So families tended to intermarry. In fact, the Sinkies and the Potters, if you are related to one of those, you probably can get in because they intermarried when, I think they were intermarried before they came to Iowa. It was either that or when they came here. So it's, yeah, just kind of based on luck sometimes. Alice is one of our prospective members. She knew because her aunts were also founding members, charter members of the organization. So all she has to do is send in a couple of birth certificates and then she's in because all the really hard work has been done. So if you know that you had a mother or an aunt or a cousin in DAR, all you need is just a couple of certificates. Birth certificate, marriage license, and your parents' marriage license probably. And then you can get in. So
Yeah,
does that answer your question?
Yeah, you just have to prove to the closest living or the closest relative who is in. And like you might not even know that relative exists. And then when you start doing research, it's like, oh, this person actually has the same name as somebody. So you only have to get maybe 2 generations rather than the whole 6 or 7 or 8.
Yeah.
So is there like a website or something that you can look? Because I think in the Andrew area, a friend of mine, their ancestors were Sislers, and I think they were a part of the DAR.
And yes, on our brochures, there are some QR codes that you can
Okay.
get right onto the website, the national website. And there's a thing called GRS, or Genealogical Research System, I think. And that will help you find, you can put in the Revolutionary War Patriot's name, or I think you can even put in the member's name.
Okay.
If you can't put in the member's name, you can get in touch with us, and our email is on that brochure as well. And we have a fantastic registrar who knows how to tease things out and find things and can find the documents and the needed paperwork. Our registrar also helped Eli Edwards get his headstone. He didn't have a headstone at the cemetery, and so she helped the Edwards family write to the government and prove that he had served, and now he does have a government-issued headstone in his cemetery plot in, is that Williston Cemetery, Michelle?
Yeah.
There also could be more Revolutionary War patriots buried here that we don't know about.
And the sons of the American Revolution, so maybe, you know, yeah. You know.
So if you know some family history and say, hey, I'm pretty sure that this person served, we can help with that too, because we'd love to find more veterans.
Who are the Sons of Liberty?
The Sons of Liberty were the first rebel cause. So they formed to figure out how to break away from England, or to figure out how to say, hey, we're not getting the rights we need. We're being taxed without being represented. And I think at first they tried to do it without a revolution, but it didn't happen that way. So then, yeah, the ball started rolling and the Boston Tea Party happened. But it was men like Joseph Warren and Samuel Adams and you know, all the big names that you hear about were probably Sons of Liberty.
And they did come to our reenactment, remember? The Sons of Liberty had a table.
The Sons of the American Revolution?
The Sons of Liberty.
The Sons of Liberty
So
has a
see,
group too.
I'm
Okay.
trying, that's the one I'm asking you.
Oh, I don't know about
That's
Sons of
That's
Liberty
who
group.
I was asking about.
Oh, I don't know if there's a contemporary Sons of Liberty group. There could be.
But
Yeah,
they
like-
did, they came to our reenactment, but I didn't kind of know the connection.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah.
So you know, if you enjoyed this talk, we do have others that we can give to ladies of the American Revolution, because we just don't hear their stories very often. Michelle kind of alluded to the fact that there were some women that dressed as men because they wanted to fight. And they got away with it. They got injured and they'd go off and sew their wounds closed because they didn't want the doctor to find out. They were tough ladies, but we do have a presentation on them as well. So yeah, we love history.
Yeah, and if you belong to Rotary or Chamber or any other organization, Kiwanis, and you're like, oh, you know what, we need somebody, we'll do something too.
We also have a presentation on founding fathers who were Masons. So if you're part of the Masonic organization, we do have information on that as well. You heard, or well, I guess I didn't say it in the thing, but Dr. Joseph Warren was also a Mason. So, and of course George Washington too. So the ties run very deep. Any other questions or comments? Well, I hope you learned something new. I know I did when I was researching this. Not to cut on schools because there's so much to learn, but there is so much more to learn outside of school, which is why these kind of organizations are so important, because it just extends the learning and keeps you young at heart, because your brain keeps growing when you learn more information.
Thank you so much, that was awesome. So, another brown bag lunch. About the ladies, that would be great. That'd be good. I just want to remind everybody while they're here, because I think I didn't fully think about what was going on, but when we've been talking about Dr. Frank, and we were talking about the recordings that we have and how interesting they are, I hadn't realized before this that that was a project done by the Daughters of the American Revolution for the bicentennial.
Okay.
And so we have several different, they decided, you can see what today's DAR is doing toward the 250th. This is what the members decided to do for the 200th anniversary. So, and that's the one where Helen's father was interviewed, and Dr. Frank and Ben Jacobson, they did several because they wanted to leave an oral history where people could actually listen to the voices and hear in their own words the people talking about the history. And they talked about history from 1900 until 1976, I guess. And so DAR does wonderful things, and I just think it's wonderful. So thank you very much. They're awesome.